This is our Swift Basecamp 2. It's a 2020 model, and at the time of making this video we've owned it for 7 months. This is our first caravan, and I've had no prior experience of towing a caravan before. And here I am, just a couple of weeks ago, effortlessly reversing the Basecamp onto a pitch. And about 20 minutes before this manoeuvre, I was in a sticky situation on a B road which I had to reverse out of. So how have I achieved this? Let's discuss. The day we went to buy this Basecamp, I drove 100 miles to Doncaster with my wife, with no experience of towing whatsoever. I'd never towed a caravan, and I'd never towed anything in my 25 years of driving. And on the way up there I was nervous about the prospect of towing the Basecamp home, but my focus was more on how I was going to get the Basecamp on the drive, being that it's quite tight where we live in. There's often cars double parked in front of the drive. I knew I had the motor mover, so in my head I had an idea of how I was going to do it, but it was anticipation of the unknown. And when we arrived in Doncaster, it was a lovely rural location, nice country house, and it was a long drive, and this Basecamp was at the bottom of the drive waiting for us to collect it. And we agreed the sale, as you do. We paid the previous owner the money, and the previous owner hitched this Basecamp to my car. And it was only when I got in the car ready to depart that I had this overwhelming sense of responsibility, and I began to feel very, very nervous and have my first taste, if you like, of towing fear. And so I had to, tow the Basecamp up this drive. It was a sharp left turn onto a narrow B road, and then a sharp right turn straight after onto another B road before joining the A roads and then onto the motorways home. 2 hours later we arrived back in my hometown, and actually all those fears of that I'd had previously were gone. The Basecamp was just so easy to tow. It was almost effortless, really. But it was just when I got back onto where we live, we've got a cul-de-sac, and I pulled up outside our house at the top of our drive, and I could feel every curtain in our cul-de-sac twitching as this unique looking caravan arrived. And thankfully the motor mover just took all that stress away and unhitched it and just used the motor mover to put it on the drive. And this is a clip now of the day that I brought this Basecamp home, and here it is on our drive. And I had an overwhelming sense of accomplishment that I'd managed to get it home, and yeah, we were delighted to get it back. Looking at the hitch on the Basecamp, it's basically a standard trailer hitch, i.e. it doesn't have a stabiliser on it like other caravans do. And the reason for that is because it doesn't need one. The Basecamp is very stable to tow. The first few times I towed the Basecamp, as you would expect, you find that you have a car's tailgating behind you, because you have to drive slower than the speed limits according to the highway code. And I did feel at first the pressure of seeing cars behind me, but ultimately tailgaters will overtake you, and the best place for a tailgater, of course, is in front of you. Towing the Basecamp in a straight line is only half of towing the Basecamp. The difficult part is reversing it. Now, I have taken the time to practice reversing the Basecamp as often as I can, and I started by reversing in a straight line. So quite simply, when you're reversing in a straight line, when you start your manoeuvre, you'll see in your tow mirrors that you have an equal space of Basecamp in each towing mirror, so you can see the Basecamp equally in each mirror. And as you reverse, if you see the Basecamp appearing more in the right mirror, for example, the Basecamp's veering off to the right, you just simply turn towards that direction and the Basecamp will come back level. And the same on the left hand side. And actually I found mastering that is then the foundations for the more difficult manoeuvres later on. When it comes to reversing onto a pitch or reversing a 90-degree turn, that does take, I've found, quite a lot of practice to master that. Now, rather than me explain that on this video, there are a number of tutorials on YouTube that you can find. This one here in particular was the one that I studied, and I watched this 3 or 4 times and then went on to practice that whenever I could in order to become proficient to reverse the Basecamp. When practicing reversing the Basecamp, it's inevitable that you're going to make mistakes, like I'm doing in this clip. I haven't yet mastered the keeping the Basecamp even in the towing mirrors, and I'm instantly going wrong, so I just pull forward and try again. I'm doing a grand job here of reversing the base camp onto the pitch. It's just a shame that I'm reversing it into the wrong corner of the pitch. No doubt, much to the amusement of fellow caravanners. So I just correct it, pull forward and start the manoeuvre again. At the beginning of this video, I mentioned that there was a situation that I got myself into that I had to call on all the reversing practice that I put in the months prior. And what happened is just recently we were at a campsite, and it was a rural location on a B road, and I'd taken the wrong junction on this B road, so I'd gone off down the wrong road. And I'd gone about half a mile down the road. I'd realised I'd gone the wrong way, but it was miles to drive around to come back on myself. So I sort of pulled in on the left hand side, and I noticed there was a farmer's track, and I pulled in there and I thought I'll just have a look at that to see, can I reverse the base camp onto it. And by the time I pulled in and I'd gone to have a look, all the traffic in North Wales on that day had descended onto that B road. I had a line of traffic in front of me waiting, I had a line of traffic behind me waiting, a tractor was waiting for me as well. So all of a sudden I was committed to reversing the base camp into a farmer's track. And I did this manoeuvre, practicing with applying the practice of keeping the base camp level in the mirrors, and then doing a 90-degree turn, and I put the base camp and reversed into this farmer's track absolutely perfectly. And then I pulled out and went back on the other way. Now, to the people waiting for me, I must have looked like I've been caravanning for years, but inside that car I can tell you I was literally trembling. My foot was trembling on my brake pedal. But because I'd put the practice in and I'd gone through the pain on the campsites of everybody watching and just practicing the reversing, when I found myself in a tricky situation like that, I was able to call on that practice and get myself out of trouble. So look, on reflection, again, I would just say always take that time to practice, because there will be a time with your base camp that you find yourself in a similar position like I did. So there are my experiences of towing the base camp over the last 7 months. Thanks very much for watching this video, and I hope you found it useful.